Talukdar. I'm a lawyer by profession. And should I click on continue?
Yeah.
I'm Shuma Talukdar from Friends for Future. I'm a lawyer by profession and I welcome you all on this environmental law series. Our speaker for today is Bijitri Roy. She is the managing director of Inspire and she did her master in commercial law from University of London. Miss Roy, so the platform is yours. You can start with your presentation. BJ3, you can start.
I was unable to unmute myself. Yeah. So hello everyone, and before I start presenting, I'll just quickly give an overview of the topic that we'll be discussing today. So the topic, of course, is trade laws and climate change, addressing climate change under WTO. So, as you all are aware that climate change and protection of environment vis-a-vis trade is a very niche concept, which still needs to be addressed on priority. And as you know that even, I mean, if we go back historically, prior to the 1970s, the term climate change in itself was unheard of because it had still not received global attention as such. And why the topic climate change and trade that I've picked up for today's discussion is mainly because, I mean, the phenomenon of climate change, global warming, they've all been the cause of concern for everyone. So, be it, I mean, ministers, scholars, academicians like me, or students, policy framers, international organizations, lawyers, activists. So everyone has been quite concerned with the phenomenon of climate change and protection of environment. And it has been seen that, the main cause of climate change is attributed to the greenhouse gas emissions. So, and these include carbons, both chemical and organic, nitrogen oxide N2O, methane CH4, and chlorofluorocarbons. And as you know that the greenhouse gas emissions increase carbon in the atmosphere, and since carbon stays in the atmosphere for a very long time, the effect is prolonged and bears very serious consequences. And so the main aim of any policy or framework for climate change is definitely the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in general, because the main, as I said, that the main cause of climate change is the fact that all these carbons that are released into the atmosphere stay back in the atmosphere for so long. So we don't even know how many generations back that the carbon that is affecting our environment at present has stayed in. So keeping this in mind, I'll start with my presentation, and I'll quickly share my screen, and I hope it's visible. Yeah. So, I mean, just coming to the background and the rationale behind choosing this topic, basically. So, one of the main reasons, of course, is that I plan to take up research on the phenomenon of climate change and how it is related to international trade, and how international trade organizations or bodies can address the issue of climate change uh, formally, rather than just having probably different meetings or different conventions on it. So why not formalize the whole thing under one umbrella? So that is one of the topics of research that I'm looking forward to. And of course, as I said, that the background behind climate change, or what exactly is climate change, or what is causing climate change, what is causing the global warming, as we call it. So, of course, as you can see, the greenhouse gases are responsible mainly for it, and the
Sorry,
greenhouse
just to
gases.
interrupt. Maybe you can put it on presentation mode.
Yeah, just one
Thank you.
second. I hope it's
Great.
visible now. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, as I was saying, that the greenhouse gases, just to repeat for those who might have joined in a bit later, the greenhouse gases mainly include the chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, carbons, both organic and chemical, nitrogen oxide, N2O, and methane, CH4. And these are basically the gases that are emitted mainly from the industrial, or if you can call it, an effect, a bad effect of industrialization, is the fact that greenhouse gases are emitted and are staying back in the atmosphere for a long time, causing climate change, ozone depletion, etc. And just to quickly come to the background of addressing the issue of climate change internationally. So, of course, we have the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol. So, the Kyoto Protocol came in the 90s, and the three important aspects under Kyoto Protocol to address the issue of climate change were emission trading system, ETS, joint development, and the clean development mechanism. So I'll just quickly try to summarize what exactly are these three mm, mechanisms that are mentioned under Kyoto Protocol. So basically, if we come to the emission trading system, or the ETS, so that is basically the trading of carbon units between the two types of nations that the Kyoto has divided countries into. So they are the Annex 1 nations. And so basically, for those who are not aware of the mechanism under the Kyoto, so basically, the nations or the countries have been divided into two categories. One is the Annex 1 nations, and the other is the non-Annex 1 nations. So basically, the Annex 1 nations are the nations that are considered to be the developed nations, as we call them. So basically, coming back again to the emission trading system, ETS. So it is the trading of carbon units. So basically, carbon units, we are calling it in terms of the emission of carbon that each of the countries is considered to be producing. So trading of the carbon units between the Annex 1 nations, from nations with carbon credit to those with a carbon overshoot. Then the next one is the joint implementation mechanism under Kyoto. So again, it is an implication on the Annex 1 nations itself. So Annex 1 nations can basically invest in the emission reduction projects of another nation, and can receive emission reduction units, which are known as ERU in short. And then the third mechanism under Kyoto is the Clean Development Mechanism, CDM. So the emission reduction projects in developing nations can make them earn certified emission reduction credits, ERC again. And basically, these credits that each of these countries is receiving are saleable credits and can be used by any industrialized or developed nations to meet a part of their emission reduction targets under the Kyoto Protocol. Now, basically, if we come to what exactly I find as a flaw in this particular system, A, is that basically there is very little effort to reduce the carbon footprint, or to reduce the emissions. It is just a way of sort of transferring the emissions, the responsibility of causing the emissions. So basically, if a country is, for example, a country A is industrialized and is producing a certain amount of say carbon into the releasing a certain amount of carbon into the atmosphere, but because it is because there is a mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol to sort of trade it. So what they are basically doing is they're not making any effort to reduce their carbon footprint as such. What they are basically doing is they're just transferring the responsibility from one country to another. Or basically they are, this is like a, if I may put it in a more, I mean, in an easier way, they're basically trying to greenwash. Just like there is a whitewash, there is a greenwash that is happening under this mechanism, and that's why I feel it is sort of faulty in that sense in the long run. And I think that is one of the reasons I feel that the Kyoto protocol mechanism hasn't really done that well. I mean, the expectation that we had during the 90s from the Kyoto Protocol and the promising um, the promising mechanism that was portrayed under the Kyoto Protocol, I think that has failed because of this mechanism that was basically implemented under it. Now, now, again, coming back to the rationale of taking up this topic for the research. So again, now coming back to the main part of the discussion, which is basically the mechanism under WTO and whether WTO is addressing the issue of climate change or not. Now, to be very clear on this, WTO does not have a very specific agreement or a very specific mechanism on climate change even to this day. All they have is, if you see the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, you will find that under Article 20, which is on general exceptions, you find that under Article 20 clauses G, basically, you have certain provisions that are given in relation to environmental protection. But that again is very limited to certain criteria for sort of identifying what are the issues of environment that need to be protected, and there is very little that is actually provided in relation to climate change as such under it. There can be certain possible links that, I mean, while researching on this previously also, there were certain links, some possible links that we may try to consider under if we read Article 20, Clause G of GATT very carefully, we find that we might find some kind of synergy and some kind of relationship between trade, environmental protection, and climate change in that sense. So one, of course, is that it's very clearly mentioned, and also if we see certain cases that are existing under the WTO mechanism, we find that most of these cases under Article 20, if they are addressing the issue of environmental protection in some way or the other, they are repeating it time and again that the atmosphere is an exhaustible natural resource, which is something that I feel is a positive step ahead in that sense, in the long run, that the very fact that the atmosphere is an exhaustible natural resource has been addressed so clearly in most of the cases that have come under this concept at WTO, the dispute mechanism uh, process. And the next one, of course, is that if you also go through the website of WTO, they have a lot of literature now available specifically talking about climate change. And one of the important aspects that they have covered under that is related to having a possible climate change policy in the near future, which is going to be addressed. I mean, I'm hopeful that probably it would be addressed under a separate agreement altogether, which I hope that all the countries, irrespective of whether it's a developed country or a developing country, or I mean, it should definitely, I feel it should rather definitely not be the kind of mechanism that is existing under Kyoto, where there is a differentiation between Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 countries. Here, I think if WTO is uh, going to address the issue of climate change and actually come up with a proper climate change policy, in that sense, I think all the member countries of WTO should have equal participation in it and equal contribution to it. And the main part of that climate change policy, I feel, would be to establish a substantial relationship with the conservation of the atmosphere, rather than just again going back to that greenwashing that has already been happening over the years. Now, coming to a positive concept, this is not greenwashing. I'll talk about greening of WTO. So basically, the ad hoc working group on trade and climate change in 2010 of WTO came up with certain viewpoints of their own, and they said that these are the points that need to be addressed as such. So I'll just quickly speak about them. So the first one, of course, is elimination of tariffs on environmental goods and services. Then the next is harmonizing the standards and technical regulations to enhance energy efficiency and promote sustainability. Balancing innovation and access to speed up the transfer of new clean technologies, green government purchases of goods and services. Then prohibition subsidies for fossil fuel, legalizing environmental subsidies which encourage the development of green technologies, and using the evolution of GATT and WTO as a model for building effective global architecture to combat climate change. I think all these points that were mentioned by the ad hoc working group on trade and climate change in 2010 are very relevant. And at the same time, they also address the issue of climate change under one umbrella quite well. uh, Now, coming to quickly coming to trade liberalization and mitigation of climate change. So there are these 4 points that I identified from the initial research. So one, of course, is there should be an efficient allocation of resources whenever we talk about trade liberalization or we talk about globalization. We sometimes just continue to focus on we continue to focus on the financial aspects or the economic aspects of trade, but we at times we forget to address the sustainability aspects of trade in that sense. And I think when we talk about trade liberalization, it should not definitely be limited to the financial or the economic aspects of it. It should definitely be in terms of addressing sustainability quite well. So over there are these 4 points that I would like to make. One is the efficient allocation of resources. So when I say resources, I'm not just talking about um, I mean, the industrial resources. I'm also talking about the natural resources and human resources in that sense. Then raising standards of living, of course. I mean, uh, industrialization should not only focus, or trade liberalization in that sense should not only focus on the benefits I mean, the immediate benefits of economic or financial gains as such, but it should definitely address raising standards of living. And when I again say standards of living, I'm not just talking about it in a monetary sense, or I'm not talking about it in the sense of uh, the I mean, how well the houses are built, or how well the industries are. But raising standards of living, a very important concept under raising standards of living should definitely be that I should receive an atmosphere, or I should receive a place to live in, which is, I mean, to say the least, it should be safe for me. It should be safe for the coming generations. In terms of, I mean, how well the environment is being managed, and how well the environment is being protected, and whatever, I mean, whatever harm has already been caused to the atmosphere in over the years, if in some way the effects can at least be stopped for a while, instead of letting it grow further and making standards of living even worse, then of course there is a demand for better environmental quality, which again is part of raising standards of living, I feel. And the last one is improvement in access to services. So these, of course, are very general and generic points that I'm making, and it's just that all these 4 points are very relevant when we address the issue of climate change as well, or we talk about our basic right to live. So when we talk about our basic right to live, we definitely at times we forget to address the very basic need of any human being, which is to live in an environment uh, which is not toxic, and which is environmental friendly, which is green in that sense. And I think over the years, of course, a lot of effort has been made globally, a lot of effort has been made internationally to take care of these aspects. But I feel that if there is an international policy on climate change that comes up specifically under WTO, I think these issues or these points will definitely be taken care of, just like the ad hoc committee had uh, sort of identified those points in 2010. Now, coming to the WTO toolbox rules. So, basically, under the WTO, this is just a quick overview of what exactly is there under WTO and how we can relate all of those to sort of addressing the issue of climate change in that sense. So, one is, of course, tariff measures, then there is general prohibition against border quota, general non-discrimination principles, subsidies rules, technical regulations and standards. So when I say technical regulations and standards, I talk about the technical barriers to trade, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and then disciplines relevant to trade and services. So when I talk about trade and services, I am definitely talking about the inclusion of services which are being rendered or could be rendered possibly towards environmental protection, and can be specifically addressed under GATS. And the last one is rules for intellectual property rights. So of course, this is something that can be addressed even more clearly under the TRIPS. Um, now, I'll I'll very quickly come to certain criticisms that countries like India have made over the years of the unilateral trade measures or the border measures that are taken up by specifically when we talk about again going back to Kyoto and try to mix that with the discussion on international trade and climate change. So basically, there are certain unilateral trade measures or border measures that countries like US, EU, UK have been accused of over a period of time. And some of the points I feel are very relevant in that sense. I mean, these are some of the points that I have, tried to summarize as precisely as possible. And these are the main points of contention, I feel, under the criticism of unilateral trade measures by these countries in question. So one, of course, is carbon footprint standards. Then, so these are basically very technical terms, and I'll not really go into the details of these. But of course, if anyone from our participants today who want some further information or any further, um, if they want to know any further developments on these in the near future, you can definitely write to me, and I'll be really happy to answer on that. So all these points, very quickly, I'll brief you on them. So there's carbon footprint standards, carbon border taxes, cap and trade scheme, EU emission trading scheme. Again, this EU trading emission trading scheme has been criticized for, uh, as I had mentioned earlier, greenwashing. So this EU emission trading scheme, for example, has been criticized over a period of time for doing that. Then there is American Clean Energy and Security Act 2009, and the last point in general that I mean, India had also made while criticizing the unilateral trade measures was that all these measures that are taken up by these countries to sort of try to, I mean, to uh, to address the issue of climate change, but at the same time, they do that at the cost of the developing countries in that sense. So these basically undermine the principles of common but differentiated responsibility and equity, which is a very important aspect under international law and under international economic law as such. Then, if we also try to examine the concept of common but differentiated responsibility and equity under the UNFCCC model, so these are some of the articles that I have identified under the UNFCCC, which address the concept of common but differentiated responsibility and equity of countries. So the first one is Article 3.1. So basically, if we summarize what is there in Article 3.1, climate change to be handled on the basis of equity, and developed countries should take a lead in climate change. Then the next is Article 3.4, which basically talks about the measures that can be taken to protect climate change, and those should be appropriate to specific conditions of each of the parties. Now, if I say each of the parties, I'm talking about the parties that are members under UNFCCC or participants under it. Next, we come to Article 3.5. Measures can be taken to combat climate change. Should not create any kind of arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or a disguised restriction on international trade as such. Um, and then coming to Article 4.3, developed country parties of the UNFCCC shall provide financial resources and help, including for transfer of technology, TOT, needed by the developing country parties under it to meet full incremental costs of implementing climate change measures. Then the last one as I have identified from a reading of the articles is Article 4.5, which states, according to which developed country parties need to take steps to promote, facilitate, and finance transfer or access to ESTs. Now, I'll now quickly come to some of the latest developments. So basically, as you know, the COP21 took place in 2015 in Paris, and this was something that all of us were actually looking forward to. So just to quickly summarize what exactly happened at the discussion over there. So according to all the discussions and deliberations that took place at COP21 in Paris, climate change represents an urgent and potentially irreversible threat to human societies and the planet, and thus requires the widest possible cooperation by all countries and their participation in an effective and appropriate international response, with a view to accelerating the reduction of global greenhouse gas emissions. So, as you can see from the first part of the conclusion of the discussion, they have definitely addressed the fact that climate change is an urgent and potential irreversible threat to human societies. Now, when I say urgent and potentially irreversible threat, I actually, I mean, as the members have very clearly pointed out during the discussion, that climate change, whatever harm has been caused by climate change, is definitely irreversible in that sense. We cannot really go back to how things were before climate change or before global warming sort of shook the world as it is right now. But definitely, there is a requirement and there is scope for all the countries in general to you know take up effective and appropriate international participation into it. And the very basic thing that they can probably take up and do is to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions. And in that sense, I think the carbon emissions that we've all been addressing over these years, the carbon emissions the issue of carbon emission needs to be addressed in a clearer way, and not just talk about it in terms of uh, the moving of responsibility from one kind of nation to another kind of nation. It should be a very collective effort that should be made by nations in general. Then next we talk about the deep reductions in global emissions will be required in order to achieve the ultimate objective of the UNFCCC, and and emphasizing the need for urgency in addressing climate change. And it had been addressed during the convention itself that climate change is a common concern of humankind, like I already mentioned. And parties should, when taking action to address climate change, they need to respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations on human rights, the right to health, the right of indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people in vulnerable situations, and the right to development, as well as the other aspects that are gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. So as you can see from the conclusion of the discussion of UNFCCC COP21 at Paris 2015, um, certain points that have repeatedly been mentioned is that climate change is an irreversible threat to human society, and the issue needs to be addressed as early as possible. So this is like a ringing bell um, for um, for all the countries, irrespective of their status as such under trade. The second important aspect is the global emissions. Now, the issue of global emissions or the issue of global greenhouse gas emissions needs to be controlled and addressed as early as possible. And this again should be a collective effort rather than being a responsibility on a certain group of countries, which I feel is a very positive step ahead in that sense. Next is that when we are addressing the issue of climate change, it should not only be limited to the fact that we are trying to protect the environment, or we are trying to protect the world from a global catastrophe that lurks around. But we are actually talking about the very basic need of human beings. The very basic need of human beings is right to health and right to life. So, right to health and right to life are something that always need urgent attention. And when we are saying that the issue of climate change needs to be addressed in that light as well, we are definitely in the right path, I feel. In that sense, that we have actually acknowledged, we have acknowledged the fact that climate change is a global issue that needs urgent attention. And secondly, we are definitely aware now that climate change or the protection of the environment is a human rights concern as well. And along with that, when we are talking about right to development, we are definitely including um, other issues like gender equality, empowerment of women, intergenerational equity, rights of children, persons with disability, etc. Now, I have also made a quick summary of the key debates and developments that have taken place over the years, directly or indirectly addressing the issue of climate change, environmental protection, and the role of international trade in that sense. So the first one that I would like to mention is the Marrakesh Agreement under WTO mechanism. So the members during the Marrakesh Agreement agreed upon establishing a clear link between sustainable development and a disciplined trade liberalization to ensure that an open trade market follows the environmental and social welfare objectives. Then the next point that I would like to mention is related to the Doha round. The Doha round is basically considered to be one of the most important uh, discussion forum or rounds under the WTO mechanism. There were a lot of issues and a lot of concerns that had been addressed at the Doha round. Two of the most important um discussions that were concluded. One was to have a multilateral trade and environment negotiation for sustainable development. And the second is liberalization of environmental goods under GATT. So once I am done with a summary of this, I'll also discuss a bit on what exactly at present we have under WTO mechanism to address the issue of climate change and environmental protection. Next are the GATT rules. So in general, like I said, that under GATT, there is Article 20, or specifically if we talk about it, Article 20, Clause B and G are basically talking about the general exceptions. And by general exceptions, they mean that the WTO members can adopt domestic measures for protection of the environment, human health, and human life, as long as such measures are in compliance with the GATT rules or fall under the exceptions as mentioned in Article 20. So basically, one thing is very clear from a reading of Article 20 is that WTO uh, is definitely addressing the issue of environmental protection. If not directly talking about climate change, it is definitely talking about environmental protection and sustainability in that sense. Next, coming to the Uruguay round. At the Uruguay round, there was a discussion on the liberalization of services of the services sectoral classification list under GATS. So this again, when we talk about it, we are talking about environmental services, which has been defined in under GATS. And last, if we talk about the two special committees under WTO, which definitely have been positive steps towards addressing the issue of trade and environmental protection in that sense, or they talk about mm, protection of the environment and human health and life. So one is, of course, the Committee on Trade and Environment, CTE, and the other is the Committee on Technical Barriers to Trade, the TBT committee. Now, having discussed the very basic aspects of WTO, climate change, environmental protection. Now I'll quickly try to talk about. Um, I'll just talk about certain articles under the UNFCCC once again. For if anyone has missed out while I was very briefly talking about them in the presentation. So, and for anyone who wants to make a note of or to just note down the articles that I'm mentioning under the UNFCCC. So this is just a short repetition for them. So just to quickly sum up, Article 3.1 of UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Negotiations. that climate change is to be handled on the basis of equity, and developed countries should definitely take a lead in climate change. Article 3.4, measures to protect climate change should be appropriate to specific conditions of each party, and economic development is essential for addressing the issue of climate change. Article 3.5, measures taken to combat climate change should not create any arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or a disguised restriction on international trade. Article 4.3, developed country parties shall provide financial resources, including for transfer of technology, etc., uh, needed by developing country parties. And the last is Article 4.5, where developed country parties shall take steps to promote, facilitate, and finance transfer or access. Now, just quickly to summarize on when I spoke about the environmental goods and the environmental services, when I was giving you a brief overview of the key discussions and debates that have taken place. Um, so the first is liberalization of environmental goods. So in relation to trade liberalization and environmental protection, the WTO members have been working mutually to a large extent to eliminate trade barriers in goods and services, which can help to protect the environment as well in the long run. And trade in products and services to improve energy efficiency, reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and improvement in the quality of water, air, soil, natural resources has been encouraged over these years, especially under WTO. And if such negotiations are successful in future as well, this could be an advantage for trade development and the environment. Now, environmental goods are expected to cover a number of key technologies which can bring in a global fight against climate change, and reduction or emission of import tariffs and non-tariff barriers on these types of products to clean the environment are expected to reduce their price and make them more accessible. Like I was talking about the greening technologies, which had been mentioned by the ad hoc committee in 2010, that greening technologies using products such as wind and hydropower turbines, solar heaters, tanks to produce biogas, landfill liners for methane collection, etc., had been negotiated during the Doha round. And in 2007, the European communities, EC, and US had also submitted a proposal to give priority in WTO negotiations to climate friendly or environmental friendly goods and services linked to adapting and mitigating climate change. Next, very quickly, I would like to talk about liberalization of environmental services. Now, as I had mentioned when I was giving you a brief overview of the important discussions and debates, so during the Uruguay round, negotiations had their primary focus on sewage services, refuse disposal services, and sanitation services. And these are listed in the environmental service sector of the services sectoral classification list under GATS. And other related environmental services include cleaning of exhaust gases and nature and landscape protection services, which are directly relevant to mitigation measures in relation to climate change. And in the recent times, as you may have, I guess, come across while reading literature on these, the other related environmental services have seen a rapid expansion owing to an increasing demand for environmental regulations and with a view to expanding economic growth as well. And such services can prove to be an advantage in the long run, provided that the regulatory measures under GATS are made strong and conventional enough to cater to the issues of trade, environmental protection, climate change, and ultimately sustainable development. Now, coming to very quickly now, I'll summarize. I'll just quickly summarize on the latest developments that have taken place, perhaps since 2010 till now, and this will definitely give an overview of what we can look forward to in the next 10 years as well, in that sense. One, of course, is an important aspect of addressing climate change through agricultural and non-agricultural negotiations as such. Now, negotiations on agriculture and market access for non-agricultural goods can also help in climate change mitigation and adaptation. And certain points have been addressed already under WTO during their meetings and negotiations. And India has been very vocal in that sense ever since 2001, in that sense, while addressing certain global issues and certain domestic issues in relation to trade in agriculture. There were these, now if we just quickly look at what exactly was concluded during all these negotiations that have happened related to agriculture and market access for non-agricultural goods in relation to climate change. So the first is elimination of tariff and non-tariff barriers, and a reduction in agricultural support in developed countries may lead to a more efficient allocation of global resources and production. Second is that trade negotiations will definitely lead to increased trade opportunities for developing countries, which can lead to an income gain for these countries, which can enable the poorer countries to reduce their vulnerability to the effects of climate change by investing in irrigation measures, etc. And when we talk about it in the longer run, the enhanced predictability associated with WTO commitments since the Doha round could help to offset less predictable shifts in weather and productivity. And this will definitely ensure that developing countries or the least developed countries do not suffer disproportionately from the negative impacts of climate change. Now, coming to those two special committees of WTO that I had mentioned earlier. So the first one is the Committee on Trade and Environment, CTE. Now, the work program of the CTE takes care of the main issues in relation to trade and environment. And in addition to the common issues, such as those related to emissions, danger to human, animal, and plant life, the CTE also has the responsibility and has, um, at least till now, has also addressed the issues indirectly related to climate change. Example, they have talked about environmental benefits to remove trade restrictions in the energy and forest sectors, for example, and the effect of energy efficiency labeling on market access. Now, CTE is basically considered to be an incubator for ideas to carry forward the trade and environment and climate change agenda, and is definitely the main gateway if the members wish to explore further relations between trade, environment, and climate change. Now, coming to the next one, which is the Committee on the Technical Barriers to Trade, the TBT Committee. Now, the TBT Committee provides a forum for discussion on technical regulations adopted by various governments for mitigation of climate change. And some such discussions are in general related to technical specifications and labeling requirements of goods and services. And such measures fall well within the ambit of technical barriers to trade agreement under WTO, which in general imposes rules on the avoidance of unnecessary obstacles to trade and harmonization of trade in general. And in addition, the TBT agreement, as you know, if you have gone through the literature of WTO agreements, you would know that the TBT agreement requires its members to share information on technical regulations which may have an impact on international trade in general. Now, I'll not really go into the technical details of the ISO standards that the TBT agreement also talks about, or the committee of TBT tries to look into or regulate. I'll now quickly come to how far have we come since the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol, as I have mentioned in my earlier discussion, is I mean, it came in 1997, and the Kyoto Protocol had had been a very promising instrument, or a promising uh, protocol in that sense to address the issue of environmental protection and climate change at that point of time. But looking at the flaws, or looking at one of the main flaws, like I have been mentioning for a while, are in relation to the differentiation that has taken place between the Annex 1 and the non-Annex 1 the nations. Apart from that, the efforts are not generally in relation to reducing the effects of greenhouse gases or reducing the effects of emission as such, but just to sort of shift the focus of the emissions from one country to another by allowing them to purchase carbon credits or to invest in carbon credits in that sense. So the UNFCCC, of course, has been a positive step and has recognized the problem of climate change. And now, if we talk about the developments since the 90s in relation to climate change or in relation to environmental protection or the protection of the environment from global warming in that sense, I'll just quickly make a summary of 4 points over here. First is the recognition of the problem of greenhouse gases and carbon emission, which cause global warming, and addressing the problem of anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The next is that there are three important goals globally which have been recognized. So first, of course, is to ensure that ecosystems can adapt to climate change. Second is to make sure that food production is not threatened in the long run. And third is definitely to allow sustainable economic development. Now, the third point, if we look at the salient features and how far we have come since the 90s, the parties to the UNFCCC have agreed to develop national programs to slow down the climate change and meet at the conference of parties where binding international treaties can be made. And in that sense, of course, the COP21 at Paris has been very instrumental in addressing the present day issues of climate change and how to not just to adapt to them, but also to mitigate it further. And um now, coming to the last part of the discussion, I'll just quickly close my discussion by um, I'll just close my discussion by taking a quick view from what Stephen Hawking had said about the issue of climate change. So, to quote Stephen Hawking, one can see from space how the human race has changed the Earth. Nearly all of the available land has been cleared of forest and is now used for agriculture or urban development. The polar ice caps are shrinking and the desert areas are increasing. At night, the Earth is no longer dark, but large areas are lit up. All of this is evidence that human exploitation of the planet is reaching a critical limit. But human demands and expectations are ever rising. We cannot continue to pollute the atmosphere, poison the ocean, and exhaust the land. There isn't any more available. I think the very fact that there isn't any more available should uh, definitely make us ponder upon what are we giving to the future ahead. With this, I'll close my presentation as well as my discussion on this topic. Of course, there needs there definitely needs to be further deliberation and discussion on this topic in the near future as well, probably in a few months' time again, when we might come across certain more literature or certain more information on any kind of development that takes place over a period of time. So yeah, that's it. I think I I spoke my mind on a lot of things that I have been wanting to address at a global forum like this. And thank you very much, Shuma and Dr. Tahir, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Vijayatri. It was a wonderful lecture. I don't want to burden with any question you with any question, as you have already told me that you are not feeling well. Just I have one small question. If you allow, if I can kindly put that question to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a simple question on Paris Agreement. How do you see the Paris Agreement is going? Do you really think that it's effective, considering the fact that the principle or it's based on the principle of name and shame? I mean, there is nothing like sanction that can, if a country is not obeying something, then in that case there is nothing that can compel them to do that. So how this kind of I think in fact it's in case of all the international laws, they don't have any sanctions. So how do you see how it's going ahead I mean, is this really effective, or what would you say on this?
Okay, so I'm really glad you brought this up. I somehow it slipped my mind while I was making my presentation. So basically, that is an important problem as such with international law in general, that there is no sanction as such. All you can actually do, as you've very rightly mentioned, is that the maximum that you can go ahead with is name and shame. There is nothing much in that sense that can be done. And I think in that sense, probably if we don't really rely on the conscience of the nations, to put it in very simple words, if we don't depend on that, I think one of the better ways of addressing and combating the issue of climate change and the impact of global trade on the environment in the long run, as I have mentioned once or twice during my presentation as well, and that is and my area of research that I'm planning to take up my further academic studies in a few months' time, is whether we can address the issue, whether we can expect the WTO in that sense to come forward with some a proper mechanism or maybe an agreement in that sense, specifically dealing with the issue of climate change, carbon emission, and liberalization in that sense. And why I'm relying a bit more on the WTO mechanism at present is that WTO has a dispute resolution mechanism in place. And at least since the 90s, you must have observed that there have been so many instances of environmental protection cases that have been addressed at a global level and have been taken to the WTO dispute mechanism forum. And so basically, again, that is very limited in scope at present, because all they can do is to address it under Article 20 of the GATT. But probably if, I sincerely hope that, WTO in the long run comes up with a separate mechanism, or maybe a separate dispute resolution mechanism in that sense, to specifically deal with the issues of climate change, carbon emission, and global trade in that sense. And if that can be done, of course, again, there would be very limited scope for sanction in that sense, again, because it is under the umbrella of international law in that sense. But we can always hope that since there is a dispute resolution mechanism, there is a proper body, there is a panel, there is an appellate body which functions as an international tribunal, or it functions as an international court in that sense. We can expect that there would be certain seriousness in the kind of cases that are brought to to the existing dispute resolution mechanism under WTO, or if a specific forum or a specific tribunal is created under the umbrella of WTO, just to specifically address the issues of probably, if I may just put all of them together in one basket, I would probably say if they can address the issue of right to life in relation to global trade. So over there, we can include a lot of these aspects of not just environmental protection, of not just climate change, but we can address the much broader issues as well in relation to the rights of children, the rights of people in general, the rights of, the disabled, women's rights. All these things can all come together under that probably a new dispute resolution mechanism to address the right to life under WTO and trade laws.
Thank you. I think there is one more question for you. Can you see in the chat box?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one more question for you. What India need to do to meet the Paris Agreement and climate change happening?
Okay, so this again is um, I don't think I am right now in the position to answer this question, because I think if we look at how the issues of climate change or the global issues of environmental protection are taken up by countries post any such convention or any such discussion, it definitely takes some time to implement uh, what is discussed in those agreements. At present, of course, a lot of greening measures have been taken up and are being taken up by India. And the very fact that we are focusing on renewable sources of energy is, I think, one of the important and pertinent steps that the country is taking towards at least, if not reducing the global emission rate, at least they are trying to control it or contain it to the level that it should be. In general, of course, again, at a domestic level also, we need a more robust mechanism under the law. We can't just rely on the existing Environmental Protection Act that is available in India. We definitely need a specific act talking about climate change, carbon emissions, and global trade. We can't really rely on an act which is from the 1980s. We definitely have had a number of amendments, and there are so many cases on environmental protection in general in India that have taken place, all the PILs by Mr. MC Mehta. But in that sense, again, the very fact that the term climate change has not really been addressed, or the term sustainability has not really been addressed as such in the existing laws of the country, I think is a sign for the country to go ahead and address what has been discussed at the UNFCCC COP21 in Paris, and to bring about a change, uh, I think a very serious change needs to be taken up to address these issues of climate change by probably bringing up legislation in place, or a law and a policy in place at a domestic level.
Thank you.
I just have a short question, maybe, I don't know, comment if you have time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. As we have seen that basically there has been is really a dramatic shift in the trade. So basically South is basically producing all the raw material, or the certain value added goods which are exported, But in this way, they're over exploiting their resources, either ecological resources or environmental resources. While on the other hand, North has become more like they're exporting human capital. They're focusing on the services sector more, which is not basically exhausting their ecological resources. So there has been such a big shift. So while all their food needs and other the living needs are basically fulfilled by the South. So this kind of there should be some sort of, what I was thinking, taking the some sort of carbon offsetting or some sort of compensation for the South. Like how, so there has no been such discussion or such points international communities talking about?
So again, this has been directly or indirectly been dealt with by the members in the Kyoto Protocol, but then that has been, I think, at present, what we actually need is something which is more non-discriminatory in that sense. And the very fact that a certain group of countries are utilizing their human resources, basically the service sector, and a certain group of countries are still using their natural resources, and basically it's a dangerous situation that, at after a few years we'll probably see that the natural resources in that part of the world has depleted, and there is an abundance of natural resources uh, in the service specific countries, in that sense. To keep a balance of this is very important, and I think this can only be achieved if there is a proper global policy and law mechanism in that sense in place, which will basically point out to the fact that there has been an probably an excess use of natural resources, or there has been no use of natural resources, or like you've mentioned, Dr. Tahir, about some sort of compensation which needs to be given to the countries in that sense that have sort of uh, not depleted, or probably not depleted their natural resources in that sense. I think the very idea of Kyoto Protocol was sort of to address this, but somehow it got lost during the process in that sense, and it then became developed countries versus developing countries in that sense, rather than being a natural resource rich country working in synergy with a human resource rich country in that sense. So I think if this gap or this lacuna can be addressed in some way globally, I think the very problem of depletion of natural resources in that sense, or an excess of natural resources available somewhere but they don't know how to utilize it, I think that issue can be addressed at a global level in that sense. And probably I think if maybe I'm hopeful in that sense that if during the next UNFCCC COP meeting, if the countries, if any of the countries take this issue up in that sense, and it becomes a great forum for deliberation and debate for them in that sense, and probably they can think of it in that sense rather than just making it an unsaid war between developing and developed countries in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bijitri. I think there's no more question and we can wind up now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you so
we
much,
can actually
everyone.
talk on it for hours, but I would not actually. There has been very interesting points. I was like thinking, but we will say put it for another meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, she's
definitely. I
not
would.
feeling well, so she already told us, and now we don't want to burden her with questions. So we
No
can
problem.
write to you maybe.
Yeah, if anyone has any queries in that sense, I mean, even for further discussion or any kind of exchange of literature that anyone would like to make, and I mean, even for Shuma ma'am or Dr. Tahir, if I mean, if we can get into any kind of further discussions on it, I'll be really happy with that, and to learn more on more in that sense from both of you in that sense.
Thank you.
So thank you so much everyone for joining us today. And our next lecture is on 23rd of July. The speaker is a lawyer, human rights lawyer from Brazil, and she will be talking on Brazilian courts on climate change. So if anyone interested, you can just write to us. We'll send you the Zoom link so you can connect and you can attend the lecture. Thank you so much for joining. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, and maybe see you next time.
Yes,
Thank
see
you.
you.
Bye.
Definitely see
Have
you.
a nice weekend.